Hey, good afternoon, NCAA men's basketball fans. This is your weekly Trog cast, two really old guys talking sports. Got Zink here. Also on the line, we've got Jim Reaker, and happy holidays to you there, Jim.
Same to you, Jeff. Merry Christmas coming soon. Got all your shopping done?
I got all the shopping that I'm going to be doing done. And I'm sure you've got family rolling in, pieces of meals. You got a Golden Eagle coming down from Milwaukee and a Billiken that's come in from St. Louis. So when you get all your college fans together, I'm sure it's going to be quite a festive occasion there in the Reaker household.
Yeah, actually taking a little vacation south, get away from this cold weather next week a little bit, going down to the Carolinas.
Oh, sweet. Got a little sunshine, a little sand. Well, we had an interesting
it's warmer
week.
Down there.
Yes, well, it couldn't be colder. In quite a week, it was going to warm up a little here. But looking back, last week we talked about two sets of games that were fun to watch and always are. First we'll go back to your Hoosier State there, the Crossroads Challenge. The two great games. Butler finally pulled it out over Indiana, and then Purdue was able to take down Notre Dame, but two well-played games.
Yeah, I only had a chance to catch the first half of the Purdue-Notre Dame game because I was going down to Xavier for the Skip Prosser Classic. And that was a game, I don't know if you saw it, but obviously it was a tale of two halves because at halftime Notre Dame had a double-digit lead. I did watch pretty much all of that, and they just took it to Purdue, and I'm thinking – this Notre Dame team is really good. They're putting it on this team that's supposed to be a top 20 team. I did catch the very beginning of the second half, and Purdue came out, and I don't know what Coach Painter said to them, but they started playing defense, and they got it back to a game right away, and then again I had to leave. But then I saw that they obviously played very, very well the second half because they ended up defeating the Irish, and that was kind of a surprise after watching that first half.
Mm-hmm. Well, I said you got to play until the whistle blows, and that's kind of tough for Notre Dame. They took two losses last week, but both the top 15 teams, Villanova and Purdue, but they'll be back on their wagon. And just so you folks know, we're going to talk about, we promised to talk about our conference picks, and we'll do that in a little bit, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about a lot of these teams later. But I guess the minor surprise was Butler over Indiana. But really not that much of a surprise. This week, the top 25 stayed basically the same, and for the teams, some movement up and down. Butler was the team that moved the most up by 5 slots, but I think that's just so they can say that they ranked them ahead of Indiana, who dropped 7 spots. But these are two teams that are solid and are going to be there and playing on the neutral court, even though it was both in Indiana. It could have gone either way.
Well, here's what I want to say is if you look at the rosters of those two teams, they're not really close. IU has some, 5-star players. Butler's not getting those players. They don't have the names you're reading about in Sports Illustrated before the season. I'm going to make this statement right now, and I've heard this from some people, that I don't know what Tom Crean does over there. They don't play defense, that's for sure. And I know Butler plays defense.
Well, they've and I just what I was going to say. Crean gets the recruits, and they do pretty well. He's another guy. You tease me about Steve Alford, but Tom Crean's another guy that I don't think he gets the most out of what he has. But Indiana's going to be there in the end. But Butler builds teams, and they have for years, even before they made those two Final Four runs. You went into Butler. You had a dogfight on your hands. I think both these teams are going to be there at the end, but I would say there's a couple more question marks for Indiana, who's had a couple of losses like that early, but it's still, relatively early in the season.
Yeah, Tom Crean came from Marquette, and the IU people were always they were excited. They didn't know that much about him, but, he took Marquette to a Final Four. He's got to be a great coach. He had Dwayne Wade. I probably could have taken Marquette to a Final Four with Dwayne Wade.
Steady, lad. So, yeah. We'll see what happens as we go through here. We're going to remember that. We're going to call Dwayne up in Chicago. Yeah, but no, he's a good coach. He almost got canned a couple years ago, and Indiana decided to stick with him. I mean, he may not be in that echelon of Williams, Cal, Patino, Krzyzewski, but you're talking about a coach that's had success just about everywhere he's gone. I think your Indiana bias is showing here, and that you want the Hoosiers to be back on top, and a lot of us do, because it's been a while since Indiana really, in their Big Red, showed in the tournament. Let's move on to...
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead and make your comments, because I was going to move on to the CBS Sports Classic.
Well, I got a great segue here. Here's what I've kind of noticed, a trend, so to speak, because we're going to talk about UCLA, Kentucky, North Carolina. I just don't think certain college coaches coach defense anymore. That UCLA, North Carolina game, the loser scored 100 points. Do you feel good about winning the game, or do you feel bad about giving up 100 points? So, and I've seen that, and I saw that with I see that with IU too. They have Thomas Bryant, who's 6'10", and a physical specimen, and could dominate inside, and he shoots 3-pointers a lot. So, I guess the game's changing a little bit, and I think that's going to have an effect. You're going to see some teams that do play defense probably do well in the conference and in March also. I think it's a key.
Well, the old phrase goes, defense wins championships, and I think Villanova proved that last year in a great final game against North Carolina. Let's move over to the Sports Classic. You mentioned, we'll talk about that first thing. Yeah, Kentucky just squeaked by North Carolina. Yeah, it was a NBA-style game, 103-100. I don't know if you got a chance to see any of that because you were down at Xavier, but it was a very exciting game to watch, especially the last 5 minutes where it was just back and forth and great shots. And Malik Monk he put the Wildcats on his shoulders. He's ended up scoring 47 of Kentucky's 103 points and just said, we're going to win this game, boys.
Yeah, UK has a few of the what will probably be one-and-doners, and the little UK basketball I have watched, he has stood out as an offensive force. He can score the ball, and he might have put himself right now in the conversation of being the number one pick coming out of for the draft in the spring. But it's a long season, and there's a lot of other one-and-doners. Of course, the Duke one-and-doners have just basically gotten on the floor in the last week, a couple of them. So we'll see how that plays out.
We'll have that in a little bit. Yeah, and, of course, then we had the UCLA Bruins getting by Ohio State, another well-played game. I think Ohio State's going to be more pertinent as you go through the Big Ten season. That's one of your conferences. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But, again, Lonzo Ball just continues to amaze out there on the West Coast.
And he didn't have a lot of points, did he? But he makes that team go. How many assists did he end up having? It was double digits, I believe. I think he only scored about 9 or 10 points.
Because the Bruins have had the scorers the past couple of years, but they haven't had that ball distributor. And I was watching a segment on ESPN the other day that was just showing all the different ways that he makes things happen to get those assists, because they also know he can shoot. Kind of like a Magic Johnson type of player that you can't leave him alone because he'll bury you with his scoring. But if you come up on him, he's going to find the open man. So that's going to be a team to watch. But I also think Thad Matt is going to have Ohio State in the Big Ten mix. And again, we'll let you talk about that when we get to our conference picks here in a little bit. That leads us up to the big game for this week. Not much going on with the holidays, and teams are finishing up just with their Christmas cookies eating, as well as the teams that they're playing. So there aren't that many games to really look at. I mean, Virginia does play a tough California team tomorrow night, and South Carolina has a Clemson team tomorrow night. But the big game, we're going to switch just a little bit south of what we talked about last year. It's going to be in the state of Kentucky, where UK and Louisville are going to play their annual match, and I'm so glad they played this game. They didn't for many, many years, and it's just become a stalwart of the college season.
Well, it's not only a rivalry, it's a bitter war. You and I know that UK fans, which we have a lot of them around here. We don't have a lot of Louisville fans living in the greater Cincinnati area, but we do have a lot of UK fans. And if there's one thing I would say that they hate more than anything, it is, number one, to lose to Louisville. Number two, to even see Louisville do well. I know when they won their national championship a couple years ago, that really didn't sit well. This is a bitter rivalry. Again, it's a war. They don't like each other. In fact, UK fans would probably tell you that Louisville's not even part of Kentucky.
Southern Indiana, they call it sometimes. Yeah, but it all made all the worse by Rick Pitino now being at Louisville, having left UK. They felt betrayed, and then when he came back, he went to Louisville. And again, but both these coaches, Coach Calipari and Coach Pitino, have won NCAA championships recently. Of course, Coach Pitino won one also at Kentucky. And the rumor on the street is these two guys don't like each other very much either.
And here's the other thing about this game. The Wildcats have played some big games on neutral places, but they have not been on the road, a true road game. I believe this one's at Louisville at the Yum Center. So this could be a test for all those young freshmen. They're going to be in a very hostile environment that I'm sure there's a few UK fans that have found a way to get into the Yum Center tomorrow night. But I think this will be a real challenge for see how they react to the hostile crowd, and it's going to be hostile at the Yum Center.
It is, and we are just getting into conference play. We're about a third through the season, so it's the perfect time to shift our gears and talk about those conferences. We started off our Trog cast talking about it. You decided to go with the Big East, the Big Ten, and the Big 12, and I took the ACC, the SEC, and the Pac-12. And I don't know if you want to start off, you want me to start off, or it's time to sort of where we go. We thought about sticking our contenders, our pretenders, and our surprise teams, and maybe even go out on a limb and pick who's going to win the conference championship.
Well, I'll start with the Big East. Of course, the conference that I follow the most because obviously being a Xavier fan. I changed the rules a little bit on the way you want me to. Some of them actually are maybe in two categories, but
I've done the same thing, Jim. So that's fine by me.
The contenders, I believe, for the Big East are going to be Villanova, Xavier, Butler, and Creighton. And again, Butler, I think, is a surprise. They lost a couple key players, but they're going to be right there at the top of the Big East. Creighton, a little bit of a surprise, not to me so much. I knew what they had coming back in Maurice Watson. I've seen him play, and he makes them go. The disappointment, and we've talked about this team before, Georgetown. Is it a disappointment? I don't know. It's kind of become they're the Jekyll and the Hyde of the league. They can probably play with anybody in the Big East, but they could also lose to anybody in the Big East the way they play. And again, what's the common denominator there? Well, unfortunately, I'd have to say it's John Thompson III, the coach that's been there for the past few years. So surprises. In my surprises, well, Butler, again, they are surprised, but again, I think they're going to be a contender. But the other two that I think are maybe a surprise to people that don't know much about the league are Providence and Seton Hall. I think they both have a 9-2 record, had some big wins. And the reason, again, why I think they're surprises is Providence lost two of their best players. Both went to the NBA. Chris Dunn, who could not only score but was the best defender in the league, and then Ben Bentel, who the big man underneath that gave them a lot of offensive power and also could step out and hit the three. And then Seton Hall lost Isaiah Whitehead, who was their star. So I think the common denominator here with these two teams is their coaches. Ed Cooley at Providence and Kevin Willard at Seton Hall. I think they've started to prove to people that they can coach, and they don't have to have a bunch of 5 stars, but give them a bunch of 3 and 4 stars, and they're going to come out with a good team every year. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Villanova is going to win the league. But
that's a pretty short limb there.
Now, you can't, you can make a prediction. Sometimes I go out on a limb and make some wild ones, but until somebody, can prove that they can beat the Wildcats. And again, here's another thing. It comes down to coaching. I think if you look at the Big East, top to bottom, I think they have the best resume of coaches of any league in the country. I'll make that statement. Again, I'm a little biased.
Well, that's a bold. There's a little Big East bias there. That's a bold one. They got some good guys in there. There's no doubt about it. And I'm with you on Georgetown. I know you know about my ice cream bets with some of my former students, and I set that up this week with a young professional who's in Tokyo, and every year we bet Xavier and Georgetown, and she was reluctant to bet. She stuck with her team because she signed the get rid of JT3 petition. She says, let's get a coach with merit, not legacy. So I'm with you there. Georgetown's got something to prove. All right.
What about we start with the Pac-12 with UCLA, their top team out there, number 2 in the country?
Yeah, okay. We can go to the Pac-12 first. You know, right now the contender, the one on top is UCLA, number 2. You know my reluctance with Steve Alford as the season goes on in coaching. I just think he has a hard time maintaining it, but his job's made a lot easier by that young man we've already spoken about, Lonzo Ball, who's making everybody around him better. And this takes pressures off of some other really good players, you know, like T.J. Leaf, who just came out in an article today as one of the most underrated players. So I think they're up there, but I think their challenge this year is going to come from Arizona. Sean Miller's going to have that team back. They started rough. They're sitting at 10-2, but they're fighting off some injuries. Now they've got their full squad on the floor, and their losses are to Butler and Gonzaga. Like you say, Butler, a big surprise, has come through, and Gonzaga always tough. But they're still looking up at the Bruins. But I think the end of February, where they get USC and UCLA at home to end their conference, is going to decide the conference. The pretender, you know, early, you know, they had them in the top 2 or 3. It's got to be Oregon. They're still in the top 25, but they've been up and down. And now, of course, if Bouchard is hurt, and I think next week as they go into their conference games is going to tell the tale. In a row, they get hit by UCLA on the 28th and USC on the 30th. Yeah, they're still going to be a tournament team, but they're not going to be close to the top 5 team predicted at the beginning of the season. And there's just something a little off there in Oregon that we can't put our figure on. And the other pretender, everybody had high hopes for them, and they've already swizzled, is Washington. They're only at 5-5, and they signed Markel Fultz, one of the highest ranked recruits. He's obviously going to be a one-and-doner, but it looks like he's going to turn into this year's Ben Simmons, a guy that's a human highlight reel and a great player, and obviously would probably be good in the NBA and a high draft pick, but he's just not able to move the needle for his team. The surprise team right now, of course, is Southern California. Received absolutely no votes in the preseason top 25, and they're at 23. They're still undefeated. But like you, I mean, they could very easily move into pretender status for me. Their only signature win is against the surprising Texas A&M team, and they're going to face Oregon, Stanford, and Cal in 3 of their first 4 conference games, and that'll tell them. And, of course, another one, which I think will fade, but it's been a pleasant surprise right now, are the Colorado Buffaloes. They do have 2 top 25 wins. You know, one against Xavier that we talked about a lot on our Razorcast, and Texas, which was 22 at the time, but it's got to be one of the biggest disappointments. I don't know if you're going to talk about them when you get to your conference. They're only sitting at a 500 record. But I think Colorado will end up being a pretender. I think it's going to come down to that UCLA-Arizona game on February 25th. And that game is in Arizona. Lots of things to do. So I still don't have faith in UCLA. I think I'm going to go with the Wildcats in the Pac-12.
Whoa. I wouldn't back you up on that one, but, you know, I'm a little more favorable toward UCLA. Yeah, you talk about the one game they play. That is the nice thing. I think there's 2 leagues that do it, and I'll move to one of them now, the Big 12 and the Big East. Everybody plays everybody twice, so you don't have to worry about the scheduling, just getting one game, an important game between 2 teams at one place. So we go to the Big 12. The contenders, no surprise, Kansas, very strong. I think they're ranked 3rd in the country this week. West Virginia, again, Bobby Huggins out there just plays defense and is always going to be in a game, and it seems like he has a better offense going this year. I actually heard him on an interview last night, and one of the things he told his team was, we stress defense, but we also got to stress not turning the ball over, because if we turn the ball over, we can't score. That's one of our problems why we don't score so much. And he said he thought this team has taken that to heart, and they've turned down or made the turnovers go way down, and that's really helped them. So I think they're going to be a contender. And then a contender that's a big surprise, if not maybe the biggest surprise in the entire country, team I think was unranked to start the season, or was very highly ranked if they might have been in the 20s, is Baylor, of course. And Baylor has probably the best resume. They won 3 or 4 games against ranked teams and have done very, very well. The thing with Baylor is they've not really gone on the road yet. They've played in a neutral site, but most of their home games, or almost all I think every game has been a home game for them other than the neutral game. So we'll see how they play out. I think they're a contender, but, I don't know how I'm not real sold on them yet. And now if they come out and they beat Kansas and West Virginia, then I think people start saying, yeah, they are a real contender. The pretenders in I think there's a lot of them in the Big 12. Kansas State, 10-1, hasn't played anybody. Texas Tech, 10-1, hasn't played anybody. And then for your disappointments, Texas, I think, is a big disappointment. Oh, one other surprise, not quite sure. They really haven't played anybody, but they're 11-1 is TCU, and Jamie Dixon's there now. He's got a strong coaching resume, so that might be a team to continue to watch, see how they do in the Big 12. Where you want to go? SEC? Talk a little UK. Anybody going to challenge them this year?
Well, we'll go to the SEC. That's fine by me. SEC, no. To answer your question, no. There's nobody that's really going to challenge Kentucky. I think the only team that can beat Kentucky is Kentucky. I think they've already proven that their 2017 royalty, they went on the road, actually neutral sites, and have beaten Michigan State and now North Carolina. And the only team they lost to is the UCLA team, which is strong, and people didn't expect much of. I think tomorrow's tussle with Louisville will show you something, but again, when it's an in-state rivalry, Cal versus Pitino, all that, you just don't know what's going to happen. I think what's going to go on with Kentucky is Coach Cal. He's got some youngsters in there, and just like every other year with his strong one-and-dones, he's got to find a way to align all the horses so that chariot rides into March and April, and everybody's on the same page. And that's going to depend upon what he does. But luckily, he doesn't have a lot of other contenders in the SEC. The surprise right now is South Carolina, but that's another team that I think could very easily turn into pretenders. They've got 2 top 25 wins, but those are against Michigan State and Syracuse, who now aren't even receiving any top 25 votes. So they're both sort of disappointments. But I think they'll be back by the end of the year under Tom Izzo and Jim Boeheim. And their only loss is against Seton Hall, who, you just spoke about, could be one of the big surprises of the Big East. And I think tomorrow against Clemson will help us decide where they sit on the surprise versus pretender meter. And the other surprise will be Florida, who, even though they already have 3 losses, they're all to top 25 teams. Their losses have been to Gonzaga, Duke, and Florida State. And they should be there at the end, but some early conference struggles could easily move them to pretender status. There's really nobody that's going to challenge Kentucky. That doesn't mean they're going to go undefeated in the league, but I think the pretenders are basically the rest of the SEC. Arkansas is off to a 9-1 start, but they'll get hit hard because they have to play Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky 3 straight games in January, and they're unlikely to survive that. So I've got to go with Coach Cal and his latest group of Fab Frosh to run away with the SEC. Again, not saying they're going to go away undefeated, but there's really nobody that's going to be there to challenge them.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Although I saw that South Carolina Seton Hall game. I think I talked about this maybe last week a little bit, that is a team that does play defense. So, they might challenge UK. I don't know if they play 2 games home and away or not. Again, that's one of those conferences where I don't think everybody plays everybody twice because there'd be way too many games.
Yeah.
But, I have to agree with you, and I also agree that UK's not going to go undefeated just because of their youth. They're going to go into someplace like Starkville, Mississippi on a Wednesday night and not play up to their potential and get beat. I don't think anybody's going to really challenge them for that championship there.
Well, then that takes you right into the Big Ten. What do you see happening there?
Well, the contenders, I have 3, and they're the 3 in the top 25. That was real tough, right? Indiana, Wisconsin, and Purdue. As far as the surprises, and I don't know if it's a surprise. I think both of us kind of looked at this early on and said, what's going on here? Michigan State, kind of a surprise that I think they're 6-5. But, of course, they had a tough schedule. They had some injuries. They got some young players. And, again, Coach Izzo will have them playing a lot better at the end of the year. Will they get into the tournament? That I think remains to be seen. Another team that nobody's talked much about is Northwestern, who is, I believe, 9-2 right now. But you got to look at their 2 losses. They lost to Butler by 2 and Notre Dame by 4. 2 teams that we've talked about are doing really well. So that's a surprise, and I think you got to watch them. Another surprise is Minnesota. Minnesota, I believe, only has 1 loss, and that was to a pretty good Florida State team. Maybe the only tough team they've really played, but I think they're 11-1 right now. And I don't know, do you know? I didn't know this. I guess I knew this and I forgot, but I looked this up. You know who's coaching at Minnesota now?
Little P.
Little Rick Pitino. So he's obviously got a good mentor on the phone, I'm sure, every day. So it'll be interesting to see what the Golden Gophers do. They might challenge there. Ohio State, I think they're almost like the Georgetown of the Big East. They're I think they'll be a Jekyll and Hyde. They might have a couple big wins. But, you look at some of their losses. They lost to some teams that they had no business. I think Florida Atlantic beat them maybe, at home even. So I think they're kind of young, and so I'm not sure that they'll be in the middle of the pack. The biggest disappointment in my mind has to probably be Michigan. Michigan's had a lot of injuries the last couple of years. They thought this was kind of their year, but they've gone up. Well, I know UCLA beat them pretty handily. So, I think that the Michigan fans thought this was going to be a better year than the preseason or the non-conference turned out to be anyway. Going back to who's going to win it, I'm going to go with Wisconsin. And that's based on I watched them play. I'm going to tell you right now, I like the way they play. I like the way they're coached. Gary Garr, who took over up there last year halfway through the season and did great things in the second half of that season, of course, took them to the NCAA tournament, actually took them to the Sweet 16. I just think that in and out, they're going to win out. Again, I just think Indiana's going to lose some games they shouldn't lose because they rely on the 3-point too much and they don't play enough defense. And Purdue, again, they kind of Jekyll and Hyde too. They play well at times, again, but other times they look very poor. They have a real big guy. I think he's 7'2", 7'4" in the middle, and he doesn't seem to contribute as much as you think he would. So I'm going to go with coaching, and I'm going to say Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten.
I can't disagree with you there. It's going to be tough. There's teams coming back. When you talk about Michigan State, being at 7-5 right now, but 4 of those losses are the top 25 teams, and Coach Izzo's already sort of talked about making the start too tough. In Michigan, I agree with you there, but there are 3 losses. I mean, the UCLA, Virginia Tech, and South Carolina, so they're not rolling over. But it'll be interesting to see. The Big Ten, it's always interesting to see how they come through. Well, then you leave me with the last one, which is the ACC, and that's going to be the toughest one. It's just hard to pick one or two from a conference that already has 6 teams in the top 25. Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida State, Notre Dame, and Virginia. And they also have 3 others receiving votes, Virginia Tech, Miami, and Clemson. And all 14 teams had winning records in their pre-conference season. I think you're going to hear a lot from Louisville and Florida State. They're both going to be strong, but I think the contenders, you got to go back to the tradition. And this year it's going to be Duke and North Carolina again. Duke just got Harry Giles back and playing, will be even stronger. They've had some injuries, but they also have those other heralded freshmen like Jason Tatum and Marcus Bolden, who were hurt early as well. And while these guys have been out, including sophomore star Grayson Allen, the Blue Devils show their depth by relying on senior Emil Jackson and, of course, the kid from just north of us here in Franklin, Luke Kennard, who's just a sophomore. So Duke is just deep, and if they weave those freshmen in, they're going to get even stronger. In North Carolina, national finalists last year, and their only losses so far this year to Indiana in Bloomington in that game in Las Vegas on Saturday against Kentucky. Their last game of the year is the season finale on the Dean Smith court on March 3rd, and that's going to be the difference maker. So I'm not going to pick one team over the other. I'm just going to say that game, I think, is going to decide who's going to be the winner. The surprise so far, we've already talked about them a couple times on our different podcasts, is the Irish from Notre Dame. They were a question mark at the beginning of the year. Mike Bray's got them as a top 25 team. Now, they did drop several spots this week, down to 25 after their loss to Purdue, which I've already talked about how I feel about that. They were supposed to lose. They were lower ranked, so I don't see why they dropped. But they'll take some lumps in the ACC, but they'll come back as a strong tourney team again. And the second team here, not on the radar yet, they just got a couple of votes, would be Miami. George Loranga knows how to build a team throughout the season. He did it at George Mason, took them to the Final Four, has had some strong Miami teams. And I think you're going to hear a lot more of them as time goes on. I think our pretender right now in the ACC is Virginia Tech. They've started strong. Buzz Williams is going to build a program there. He's got them relevant again. 2 years ago, and the year before that, they were only 2-16 in the ACC. Last year, you had them at 10-8. They're starting off very strong, but I think they're going to fade a little bit as the season goes on. They might be just a season away from going up to the top toward the ACC because they didn't have a very impressive pre-conference slate of games. They may end up being a tournament team, but I don't think they're going to really challenge the ACC. So lots of fun teams to watch in there, but I think they're going to, as they always do, beat up on each other during the season, beat up on each other in the tournament, but as many as 10, maybe 12 teams from the ACC, and you got to see one that's at the lower end. Wake Forest fights your Xavier Musketeers the other night. I think as many as 12 could go to the tournament.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at the league right now, and you could be absolutely right. I mean, that is by far probably the deepest league in the country and deserves all the accolades that they get. Yeah, I saw Wake Forest coached by Danny Manning, and they wouldn't go away from Xavier. They kept and had a chance to tie it near the end of the game if they could have hit a three with under 10 seconds to go. So, they're right now they're sitting at 8-3, which looks like a bad record in that league in the non-conference. So I have to agree with you there that's a tough conference. Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. We've got our picks made, and of course we'll review those as we get to the end of the conference and talk about the tournaments. It's a fun time of year. This is where they're taking off the gloves and they're ready to go at each other. And we've had some exciting pre-conference games, and now it gets down to the nitty-gritty, and it'll be the end of February before we know it, and we'll be talking about the tournament.
Yep. Want to give my Fort Wayne update. I know there's fans out there that need to know. Fort Wayne did defeat Stetson, the Stetson Hatters, 93-74 on Sunday to run their record to 8-3, and I believe they're undefeated. I think they're 3-0 in the Summit League, and again, that's not one of the leagues we cover with much, but I'm going to tell you right now that they're going to win that league, and they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. And again, that IU win might come back to help them if they happen to stumble in their own league tournament.
We'll be looking forward to hearing about the Mastodons while most of the rest of the Summit League is still battling it out in the FCS football playoffs, or have been. They got some great teams there, South Dakota State, North Dakota State. Always interesting to see who that small team is that emerges. Well, I'm sure you got some trivia for it. Before we get to that, we'll get to a couple tidbits. We want to send out a happy birthday wish to Jay Wright, coach of the defending champ and current #1 Villanova Wildcats. He's going to turn 56 on Christmas Eve this Saturday. And last week on our Razorcast, we talked about Raleigh Massimino passing the 800 mark. We had another one this week. Bob Huggins got his 800th coaching win. 729 of those are NCAA wins. That's what we were talking about. And Raleigh has about 518 NCAA wins. But with their NAI wins, Hugs at Walsh College got 71 there. Puts him over the top at 800. And we'll be looking forward to this season because Roy Williams is just 7 wins shy. He'll probably pass 800, all at the Division I level. It's kind of funny that prior to this season we only had 7 coaches with as many as 800 wins. Let's see if I can get that out. And we've already added 3 this year. And a neat thing because it's already going to continue, but celebrate 20 years ago when Division II star Paul Cluxton established an NCAA mark by making all 94 free throws just across the river here for the Northern Kentucky Norse. There's nobody currently that can match that. I guess everybody has now missed at least one free throw in the NCAA.
Yeah, free throw shooting seems to be a lost art in some of the games that I've watched, especially down at the Cintas Center.
Yeah, we talked about that often on our Razorcast, which we'll come to you with on Thursday. All right, Stumpy, what have you got for me?
I got one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as always, try to relate it to what we've been talking about today. And we focused on the conferences, making our picks and analysis of them so far. So the question may be pretty simple, but I always say that, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here. So which league conference in the NCAA has the most national tournament championships? And that, I'm saying NCAA. We're not including NIT.
So you're looking at NCAA
since 1939, when the NCAA started playing the
was a
tournament.
Pac-12 team. Was that not Oregon that won that first one?
A Pac-12 team won in 1939.
Yeah, and of course we've got our many UCLA teams, so it's easy to head down that route. But you've also got Kentucky, who's won a lot. But I
North Carolina.
Other than that, they don't know it. I think I got to go with the Pac-10 or Pac-12 as it's called now. And UCLA's got 11 all by themselves. I know that. And it would be tempting to pick the ACC because you got North Carolina in there and Duke. But knowing that they got the first one, I think I'll go with my conference, the Pac-12.
You are correct today. Very good. The Pac-12 has 15 national championships through the NCAA tournament. The ACC is second with 12, and the SEC not far behind with 11, and fourth would be the Big Ten with 10, even though they have 14 teams.
What's sad is I was looking at something like that a few weeks ago, and even though Villanova won last year, a lot of statisticians break it up as the old Big East and the new Big East, and they don't necessarily put them together. So I think they've got to correct over time if they kept the name. Well, you
are correct. UCLA has 11, and then I thought, who else? And you go Oregon, California won it one time, I think in the maybe 50s or 60s. Stanford won it once, and I'm not even sure where the other win is. I didn't look at it that closely, but at first I'm thinking, UCLA, but who else? But along the line, the Pac-12 won a few others.
Yeah. That's good. Well, like I say, we will be back next Tuesday with a post-Christmas Trogcast, and join us on Thursdays. We do our Razor on Xavier podcast, and we'll wish everybody out there a Merry Christmas. And my little trivial tidbit for the day is this is the anniversary, 70 years ago, for the first screening of It's a Wonderful Life, a charity event in New York City. So I'm
you
sure
weren't there, were you?
I was not there, Mr. Smart Alecky. But
well, Trogcast, two really old guys.
Two really old guys, not that old. 1946 was when it was, and that's a great way to wish everybody Merry Christmas. All to you and yours, Jim. A fantastic, lovely, and growing family that you have, and to all the people that make us happy by listening to our thoughts as we pretend to know things about NCAA basketball.
Thanks for listening. Again, thanks to Mike Goodpastor for the grueling truth, giving us this opportunity. We're having fun, and I know what we'll talk about next week. Not a whole lot of games. I guess we'll spend maybe a half hour on the UK Louisville game. I don't know.
We'll find something. All right, everybody take care and have a wonderful holiday.
Merry Christmas.